It is Nick Smoot, and I am so jacked that you get to listen to today's Ask Me Anything with the one and only Nely Galan. She's a legend. She is my friend. She has an Emmy. She owns a bunch of real estate. She's a PhD in psychology. She's a mom. She is an immigrant from a communist country to the United States and built her whole empire from scratch. She is, you name it, president of Telemundo. She's really kind of rocked and rolled. On this podcast, you'll hear her talk about being mentored by bosses that were billionaires that she spent time with. You'll hear her talk about how she learned how to overcome bullying when she was a little kid and tips and tricks she's learned when it comes to parenting. All I can say is that this is a jam-packed Ask Me Anything. We do these once a month for our Build Digital community. Don't miss them. Our next one coming up is with an AI expert for a huge corporation that is based out in Washington, D.C. You don't want to miss that one. We've done past ones with people like Steve Case from America Online, from also another fun one, a woman who founded the first Scotch brand in the history of the world that was founded by a woman. We're having a blast, and we're bringing these people to you not only as a part of a core of what we're doing with the Build Digital community, but you also get not just access to these people, you get the book clubs, you get the weekend retreats, you can get co-working. We're a global community that's connecting to the better version of ourselves, and we're building it together. So join in, let's go. And if you have any questions, feel free to email over at nick@buildcities.com, and we'll get you connected into the Build Digital platform. Have fun.
Let's dive in. I'm excited to have time to talk with you, Nely, to share this conversation with our community because a myriad of reasons. One, the insight that you have as a business leader, but also as a mom, as a thought leader, as a psychologist. You kind of have this broad way that you look at the world, but also because I understand your heart for the world through our friendship that we've had for quite a few years, and the deep conversation we've had, how you care about people in such a passionate way. You bring yourself fully to the moment. So thank you for making time today. I'm super excited to have you here.
You're so sweet. What a beautiful, I don't know if well-deserved introduction, but thank you so much.
It is super well-deserved. It is super well-deserved. From a pure biographical perspective, like I'll give you your full bio in the actual intro I do, but I mean, between real estate mogul, Emmy, you took a sabbatical to get your degree, a PhD in psychology.
Yeah.
You have influenced Aspen Institute, Coca-Cola, all these major corporations you've spoken at, and you moved to the country not speaking English with your parents when you were, what, 4? Was it 4 or 5?
5.
5. Yeah. So and you've shown up consistently when a lot of people who have had, if they could have had a scrap of success that you've had, would have just hung up the cleats and went and enjoyed their life, not worried about the world. And yet you've written books that are empowering people, and you keep showing up. So it is well-deserved. Like you're a powerhouse in the best way, and a powerhouse in the manner that we're trying to create more people who are unleashed like you. And so I am excited to have you bring like your thoughts on it. To that point, one of the things I wanted to ask about is how do you think about you're getting your mindset right? Like, have you had moments throughout your life that your mindset was wrong?
Oh my God, so many times.
Yeah. And so talk to me about when it's been wrong and maybe how you shook yourself out of it. And then also how you keep yourself in the right mindset, and what does that look like? Do you have habits and routines, and what kind of mind are you looking for?
Well, that's a great question, Nick. And it's so weird because a girlfriend asked me that question a couple of hours ago because she's going through some stuff. And so it made me think about it. So I'm fresh in my thoughts about this. I mean, just so that everybody knows, nobody is like superhuman. Everybody has doubts. Everybody has bad mindsets. Everybody has fears. Everybody has issues. And I think that I would say that the starting point, what I've witnessed, because I've also met a lot of extraordinary people in my life, and I've gotten to, to see, how they do it. I think the starting point is complete, taking full responsibility for your life, not really dwelling so much on what is being done to you, and realizing that at every moment you have the opportunity to change and be the architect of what's going on in your life. And I think that's the key to the whole story, is not being a victim, knowing that there are things that are beyond your control. There are problems that will come into your life that are bigger than anything, like a pandemic. And those things you have no control over. So you just have to like flow with it. And the rest of it, you're kind of in charge. And when I look at, even in my personal life, when I look at like people I dated in my life and I'm like, oh my God, that guy did this or that. And then when I change my mindset and I go, well, what was my culpability in the story? And I think when you go back to that and you take that as a place of growth or learning, you really can make quantum leaps in your growth. And I think for me, I have to say that I just moved to Miami like a year and a half ago because my mom got ill, and it was kind of like a force majeure thing where I had to move and stop everything I was doing. And there was a part of me that was like, oh my God, and then there was another part of me that was like, oh wow, I really could use doing nothing for a while except taking care of my mother, because I've lived such an intense, high energy life and career. And I just want you all to know that what you realize is there's only so much time on earth. And even when when you've slowed down and done nothing, you're like, I'm getting bored. I want to do more. Like there's more to do. And so I think for me, how I get my head right, and no matter what it is, whether it's my mom being sick or something's wrong in a company or something's wrong in my personal life, I go back to, what was I meant to do in this life? What am I really good at? What am I uniquely good at? What are the things that that really are my lane? What are the things that I'm jealous of in other people because I still want to do them? And those kind of things those kind of thoughts center me into what is my purpose. And I also think, my girlfriend that I was talking to a couple of hours ago, she goes, well, it's easy for you to say that because you've already made money, that you can be on your purpose. And I go, yeah, well, I was very intentional about that. In my book, Self-Made, I say, life is about mission and money should come first. And that's just a very logical thing to think about, because when you're younger, you have more energy to make money. You have more ability to not sleep and have 3 jobs or start 3 companies and fail, and you still have time to start 3 more. So you should focus on money first. And I'm very glad I did that, because yes, at this point in life, I have money to make it. Money doesn't and you know me, Nick, I'm not grandiose at all. It's not like I'm into things, but money gives you the freedom to then play, to then be more creative, to then take bigger risks, to have the time to actually really figure out what you really have left to do.
You're nailing it in a lot of ways, and it's interesting because it goes in the face of some of the principles that people teach and talk about, right? Of like, find your purpose, find your joy, find your passion, chase your passion. As many likes, hearts, stars, rainbows it'll get on social media, it doesn't necessarily translate to the actual agency and freedom that allows you to take those risks, allows you to pause and breathe. And when you think about your journey with money, it's kind of a twofold question, I guess. One is, how did you know when you hit that point, you're like, all right, I have enough buffer? Was it lifestyle? Because I think you can get to enough by how you architect your lifestyle, or you can get to enough by
enough to be $20,000, $50,000 a year. For some people, it's millions. It depends on where you live and what you do. I mean, so let's talk about that. I think that, I'm an immigrant that came to this country with no money. My parents are broke. I knew no one. So money is a painful yet important subject to me, because my parents lost everything coming from a communist country, from Cuba. And when your parents have lost everything, you know that could happen. And a lot of people in America don't think those things could happen, but we've seen little tricklings of that it could happen to us, right? And it happens to every country in the world. So who the hell are we to think that it can't happen to us,
Right.
So I pragmatically focused on money first. And meaning that it doesn't mean I did all things I hated, but everything I did, well, is that going to make money? Because if not, I can't do it, you know? And when I did it, I had a very clear, I'm blessed because I've also worked for or had as clients 8 billionaires. And I also saw that too much money makes you miserable, because then you're spending most of your time figuring out what to do with the money and how to hide the money and how to not pay taxes and how to, like, is everybody around you with you because of your money? So there's, I really have a healthy mindset about money, that you need enough money to live well-ish, but not so much money that your life is all about your money. That's another job. That's a really miserable job.
Yeah.
So I think that, what I say to, I'm lucky because I moved to LA, just to give an example, in the 90s, when they had just had, an earthquake and riots, and the prices of real estate went down. And I was able to move there and live there for a certain amount of money. And I was able to buy real estate. And as you know, because I say in my book, Don't Buy Shoes, Buy Buildings, it's not about the money you make. It's about how you save that money and how you invest it, that you're going to live the rest of your life on passive income, right? Which is what I live on now.
Yeah.
And then if I do anything else, it's extra, right?
How'd you buy your first building? How'd you buy your first building? What was that one? What was that one like outside of your own residence?
Yeah, I didn't buy my residence first. I bought my parents a little apartment so that they could retire. So my first property was not about me. It was about giving back to my parents. And I would say my second property was something I teach a lot. I went and bought something in pre-construction that I was going to rent. And the reason you buy things in pre-construction, if you're careful of how you do it, so we'll talk about that, is you buy something, you put a down payment, and by the time you have to close on it, it's worth more than what you put the money down. So there's a spread between what between what you paid for it and what you will sell it for. So you could either flip it, which is what I did. I flipped a number of properties in that were in pre-construction. And then I had enough equity in those properties that I flipped to actually buy something that then I would rent. So I did not buy my own place to live first. In fact, I bought it last. I bought properties that I could rent.
Yeah.
Because what I learned is that I needed to make money while I slept. That was something one of my bosses said to me, and I was like, what the hell does he mean by that? And he meant that you have to make money, money has to be coming in, that you don't actually have a skill that, you're not actually working for it. It's actually paying for itself. And that's extra income. That's like your side hustle in the beginning. And I was lucky that I was able to do that over and over and over again in California, because I hit a streak when California was down. I say to young people, I was just in Asheville, North Carolina, and I got into an Uber with a kid, and he goes, I can't afford to live here anymore. And I go, so move. And he goes, well, I don't want to move. And I go, well, you have to move.
Yeah.
Like, I think kids think that everything you have to. I've moved 15 times.
Wow.
I moved to places that were much cheaper and that I could make money and then move on to. Life is about doing what you have to do.
Yeah.
As a young person, you should be thinking that how do I build wealth in 20 years? Well,
Yep.
you have to go move to places that are cheaper.
How'd you do that as a mom? So let's flip the script a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Because you have your parents, right? That you deeply care for. You also are a mother.
I am.
And you're a hustler. Like, you are the tropical tycoon. So how do you balance, once you start to put down roots with children at a certain age? Because a lot of the community members we work with and the communities we work with, it ranges from big cities to super small. Like, we're doing some work in Nashville outside of there, but then all of a sudden it's a community of 1,000 people, 2,000 people in Kentucky or Oregon. And as a person who might be looking out there with a dream and a goal to maybe establish themselves more, and they feel like they're about to leave their family, their friends, if your children are putting down roots. How did you manage that with your son? Because your son, by the way, he's kind of awesome. And so you did a decent job there. So what was
I
that like
did.
managing?
I think my son is my, he said to me that he goes, Mom, I'm such a good person for you to take anywhere because I make you look good. I go, you do. I go, you do. You're like my best creation. Well, I think first of all, everybody that's thinking that, let's just say that you guys have it all easier than I did, because now a lot of people can work from home and you can be around your kid. I did not work from home, and yet I still brought my kid to work back then when he was little, and I had to hire a nanny, and the nanny had to work in the office next to mine, and I had to deal with all that, and I had to figure out how to make more money so I could afford a nanny.
Yeah. Where was this at? Where was this at when you had the nanny and kind of bringing him to the office? And how old was he?
He was a baby. I mean, when it was in LA, but he was a baby, and I basically had an office and I got another office next door, and I would bring the nanny with the baby, and I would go breastfeed, and I did everything I just made it work.
Yeah.
I mean, I think also if you move your kids, if you do you think, oh my God, it's the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. You're actually making more resilient kids. Like, kids need to know what it's like. I never kept anything from my kid. I mean, Nick, you and I've talked a lot about how I did a thing called money camp with my kid. Like, I would take my kid to a bowling alley and I would go, what do you think this bowling alley is making? Like, how many people are here? Let's see how much it costs us. Like, we'd go to a diner and I go, do you think this diner makes a lot of money? Let's do the math. And then I turned that into actually a summer camp for my son and his friends. And I'm actually working on making it into a TV show now, because I think normalizing your problems to your kids is actually good. Like, I think that it's kind of old school to think, I don't want my kids to know that I'm having problems. It's okay for kids to know you're human, and that you're struggling through things, and why they can't spend money on things, and why, I feel like I learned that as a kid of immigrants. I feel so resilient because my parents told me everything that was going on, and I was able to be empathetic and like put myself in their shoes, instead of being kids that are entitled and that think they deserve everything and don't really get why their parents are struggling.
Now, do you think, when I hear that, I think one of the instances, though, is what happens when you have a chaotic family life where your family doesn't have the emotional or the professional skills to deal with the bad decisions, right? If they're on this trajectory of making bad decisions, what does it look like to bring your kids into struggle? Because I agree fundamentally and fully with you that I love bringing my boys into business decisions and the journey and looking at numbers and budgets. I'm always concerned about them feeling like it's something they have to solve for.
Well, I think you have to really say that. I think you have to say to kids, well, let's go back to what you just said, because I'm going to unpack what you just said. First of all, I have a doctorate in psychology, and the reason I went back to school and got a doctorate in psychology is because I've had a lot of drama in my family system, as you know.
Yeah. And by the way, how old were you when you went back to college? Tell me that.
45.
Yeah, exactly. Which is beautiful.
And I got a doctorate. So I went back, but again, I couldn't have afforded to do that had I not made money, right? So, but I did that because I had so many issues in my life, in my personal life, in my family system life. And for all of you listening, I just want you to know that therapy is a great thing. Now that I am a therapist myself, and I've had to do 6,000 hours of therapy on other people in order to get a doctorate, I can tell you that it really works. And that for you to think that you have to go through this life alone, and that you could solve all the problems by yourself, or that you're crazy, or that whatever, let me normalize that for you. We all need help, and we can't figure this out alone. And every city in America has free therapy for everybody. I don't think people realize this. Even if you can't find it, every school in America that teaches therapy, those doctoral therapists have to do free therapy on people in order to get their doctorate.
Yep.
So there is no lack of free therapy in America, and I highly recommend it. Let me just tell you that I still go to therapy. I wish if I had known then what I know now, I would have started when I was a teenager. I wish I had. My son started when he was 8 years old, and that's why he's a perfect specimen. The kid is emotionally so together, and he actually, I laughed because I said to him, you got to go to, as a side hustle, you got to go to psychology school because you're already giving therapy to all your friends.
That's hilarious. I love.
He
Is
is
he
very
living?
solid, huh?
I was gonna say, where has he chosen to live? Is he hanging around in the Florida
He's,
neck of the woods? Is
no,
he
he's in
back in California?
LA because I
Yeah.
told him that he owed me and that he can do whatever he wants, but as his side hustle, he has to manage all our real estate. And so I made him get his license in California and in Florida for real estate, and he's managing all the properties. And then he's figuring out the other things that he wants to do for himself. But he's got he's got jobs and he's got side hustles and he's got, and he really understands the journey of life because he has not lived an easy life. He's had a lot of drama in his life, but he has had a lot of coaching and a lot of therapy. And as a result, and that's why I believe in it so much, because I look at a kid that's been getting therapy and coaching since he's 8 years old, and he's 24, and he's gone through a lot, and he's a solid man. Solid.
Yeah.
And so I know it's possible.
Why do you think? Why do you think most people? I was just today talking with a guy, and by all rights, people would look at him from the outside and be like, "Gosh, he's a high performer. He has his own production company. He's doing a lot of videography work. Just got back from Africa on this cool experiment that he's been out there running, and he's now part of this men's group. And he's like, gosh, it's so nice to know that everyone's kind of a mess like I am inside, and realizing that we all need help and we can lean in on each other. Why is it though that if you look at the data, a lot of our nation is struggling with obesity, mental health issues, poverty, uh, just a high level of depression is the number one disability globally, and so we have this very real unbundling of, call it human capital or just human potential, or the magic in people is kind of trapped. And you're talking about something so fundamental, which is, look, get the help you need. And yet it's almost as if we're stuck just in this hole where it's like, I'm not getting out of it. We're staying here and we're going deeper as a nation. So where's that breakdown? As someone who's a psychologist, where do you see the breakdown?
I can tell you because coincidentally, my son and I, just as you know, Nick, because you saw it on social media, we just did a trip around the world. And it was something that I really wanted to do with him because I've traveled the world and I wanted him to do it before he really started his career as he finished college. And it was very interesting because what you realize is that we're so entitled and soft. When you travel around the world and you see that people have genuine survival issues constantly, everywhere. Like we think, oh my God, the United States is so bad. Then you go around the world and you're like, oh my God, we're so good compared to everybody else. And people in other parts of the world have real day-to-day survival issues of like how to make money, how to survive, how to horrible political problems, horrible poverty problems. And yet they seem happier than we are. And my son came back and he's like, Mom, like we live in the greatest country in the world, and yet all these people are happier than we are. Somewhere along the way, we got soft. And I think it's because we have gotten to the point where we expect someone to save us, our government to save us, other people to save us. The truth of the matter is, what did I start out the whole podcast saying? You have to start out by being completely, really, you have to say to yourself, I am responsible for myself, for my happiness, for my success, for my money. And I live in the only country in the world that with all the problems we have, you can actually do it.
Right.
I mean, take me, I'm a Latina, okay? In one generation, I went from no money, no contacts, parents broke, to being a wealthy woman that lives in freedom.
Yeah.
If you took me and I had grown up in Cuba where I was born, if I had grown up in Mexico, if I had grown up in India, if I had grown up in, Chile, Argentina, Colombia, China, I would be a poor girl. There's no way, even if I'm a genius,
Yeah.
good luck in the caste system of the rest of the world, that I would be a multimillionaire in this lifetime. It would never happen. But
I'm
it
gonna
didn't happen by me sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I've
I
worked
agree.
like a dog.
Well, and I'm going to weave in a question that came in from somebody for the Ask Me Anything. And as a woman, how do you lead with power? Because I'll package that up with some extra little points here. Is like you have incredibly strong women role models, mentors, and friends.
Mm-hmm.
You have broken multiple glass ceilings as a woman in this country. You quite literally being the first at multiple things as a woman in this country. And you lead with power, and yet there's things about all of us where if it's self-talk or if it's fundamental historic baggage we're dragging around.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about something interesting is globally there's all these other countries where this couldn't happen.
Couldn't
And
happen.
no, and then there's also literally millions of women across this nation who are struggling to feel like they're leading with power.
Mm-hmm.
And you're an example of a woman who, knows the truth of yourself when you look in the mirror. And you
Mm-hmm.
also know the road that you have plowed for others to see that these things are possible. So to answer that question, maybe yes,
Yeah, let me answer.
take full responsibility, but how else do you lead with power? Because full responsibility is just a fundamental male, female, doesn't matter who you are, do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Now the next step is what?
Well, I think what we're not saying is that I found my voice, right? And I wasn't born with this voice. And when I mean a voice, I don't mean like I'm loud and complaining, and it's a voice that's appropriate, right? That's powerful when it needs to be, that also doesn't aggrandize itself when it doesn't need to, right? So, how did I learn that? I think what we don't say is that a voice is cultivated over time, right? I am blessed that I've worked for a lot of very tough people that have yelled at me, that have not treated me like a minority, that have not been politically correct, that have said to me, "You suck at this. You got to fix this. You're immature. You're this, you're that." And then I had to listen. And then I also had to, and sometimes learn to talk back, and sometimes shut the hell up and know that they're telling me the truth. And I think that the way that I did it, and I can only say how I did it, is I was, I don't think people would ever think this of me, but people that have known me my whole life, my friends from kindergarten know that this is true, that I was kind of a wimpy, introverted, quiet kid. And I've been beaten up a lot. And in that process of being beaten up by other kids, by bosses, and I don't mean literally beaten up, I mean verbally being beaten up, I started practicing what I wish I had said that at the moment I didn't have the guts to say. And what did I do? I took acting classes. I spoke in the voice of, I always say that my favorite person to emulate is Olivia Pope in Scandal, because she's so like, and because I know Shonda Rhimes and she's such a shy, quiet person, that I know that that's her inner voice. That's not the voice that she projects in the world. And I have practiced a lot. Like when a teacher would scream at me and say something, and I go, "I wish I had said X, Y, and Z." And then the next time I would try it, and it would work.
Yep.
I've had bosses scream at me like right up to my face, and I'd walk out and I'd start crying. And then I go, "What should I have said?" And I could really write in a beautiful script of what I should have said, but I could never say it. And then I started practicing, even with my friends, like, "Go ahead, tell me what he told me." And then I try it. I mean, you have to practice finding your voice. I mean, let's think of it as like a singer. Every singer starts out sounding like karaoke. Like you're karaokeing somebody else's song in their voice. And the only singers that make it are the ones that when you hear them sound uniquely like themselves. And I don't know why nobody talks about this. You have to cultivate your voice. And by the way, I have a very powerful voice. I could scare people. Like my son goes, Mom, I've seen you make grown men cry. I go, yeah, I can. And I've had to cultivate that voice because I've worked for very extremely alpha, loud men, and I've had to speak in their tone. But I've also had to cultivate a powerful, quiet, scary voice for a child that is more sweet and calming, but like, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. I'm very disappointed in you.
Yeah.
Without being a crazy bitch like I would be with a billionaire. Right? I've also had to cultivate.
Crazy bitches might need crazy bitches, right?
I've also had to cultivate. And by the way, probably the hardest voice I've had to cultivate, because now I'm such an animal that when I'm in a relationship with a man, I've had to cultivate a sweet voice, which is not as easy.
So you got to be practicing that with your friends. They're like, oh, I got to learn how to be kind.
I've had boyfriends tell me, you're yelling at me. And I go, no, I'm really not.
I love what you're saying. So I have to point something out because it's so true. So I mean, you're nailing it in answering the questions. How do you lead with power? This whole idea of practicing the response that you want to bring, the person you want to bring. It sounds probably to some, it probably sounds a little nutty to do this. However, if you in parallel think about the self-talk that you run with throughout your day, and if that was public, what is nuttier? Curating and cultivating your voice to be one that you really believe in, that you're confident in, that you're proud of, that is leading you to become the person that you can look at in the mirror and go, I'm doing it, or spinning into a deeper, darker hole where you talk insanity to yourself and say, I should have, I wish I would, blah, blah. And that self-talk is the same thing of cultivating the voice without intention, support, accountability, or positive goals. It's allowing for this negative dart throwing internally to just drag you down. And so I guess it's kind of like pick your crazy, right? Like do the one where you practice the better.
I'll give you a specific example, Nick. I'm going to give you a specific example too. Like this is true of lots of parts of our life. Like for instance, I think that I have such a powerful voice. Like I'm on boards, and if you heard me on a board meeting, like I'm on boards with billionaires that are really tough, and I can out tough them. And I've cultivated that, right? To the point where otherwise I would be squished. A Latina woman, please. And they're biased about a Latina woman, right? But I'll give you another example of like what's much more difficult for me at this point. I also have kind of a hot Cuban temper. And sometimes in my personal life, I will get like crazy, like I'll get mad about something and I'll say something that is so not appropriate or whatever. And I've had to learn to, okay, when that feeling comes up for me, I have to count to 10 and I have to say, let's sleep on that and talk about it tomorrow. Because I also realize that maybe the people that have trained my powerful voice for me, that I've emulated, are like really also a hot mess sometimes. And they're very impulsive. And that doesn't work. That might work in a boardroom where you have to make a quick decision. It doesn't really work in your personal life. It's actually very hurtful to people. And so and now my like go-to voice is, let's sleep on it. Whatever. Let's sleep on it. Because I realize also that I'm someone that as the day gets later, I get tired and I might say something like out of tiredness that's not good.
Yep. Have you?
This is very like multi-dimensional. It's not just one voice. That's like saying, again, going back to a singer, if I'm a singer, sometimes I can sing in falsetto. Sometimes I can sing in a whisper. Sometimes I can sing in like I can belt, an anthem. You got to have different colors to your voice.
Yeah. Well, and how have you learned as you have developed as a business leader, a mom, an entrepreneur, as you've played with the different voices? you just said something that was really crucial. You know, when it's later in the day, don't do X.
Right.
That means that you screwed it up a bunch, and then
Right.
you learned how not to do X. On that, kind of like as a not a complete jump, but media, like media very well. Like you have President of Telemundo, you've like have 700 plus TV shows and Emmy. You are a media guru, advising others, doing all sorts of crazy things that like you see the game well. When you think about voice, what what is going on the voice side on media right now? Because it's a hot mess. And
It's a
what
hot
is the
mess.
and what's the opportunity from somebody who
Right.
understands how to curate a voice? Like, does this make sense? I'm saying, like, what's the opportunity here for entrepreneurs and leaders who are thinking about their own content, their own channel, their own production, their own play? They might want to write a script, a film. What's missing, and what's the opportunity? What's wrong? Because it's not great.
So I think the job that I had that is most important is none of the ones you mentioned in this regard. I think that I was a TV station manager when I was 22 years old. And I think that that is the most important piece of my puzzle in terms of media, because everybody looks at TV and film, and everybody, there's not anyone that doesn't want to go, I want to make shows, I want to make movies, I want to be at a network, because that's really glamorous and sexier. Not really, but that's the appearance of it. And a TV station is akin to being the McDonald's franchise of television, right? You're like in the little town running a little TV station. It's not very glamorous. You have to go get advertising that's local, but it is the key to understanding the business model of the business you're in. And I look at that experience as the greatest experience of my life, because I know what it takes to run a little tiny retail store, if you will, that has to work in a local market. And when I went to a network, the reason I was the Latina that could, and that ended up running a network, which no other Latina has ever done, I thought somebody would follow me, but they haven't, was because I knew the meat and potatoes of running a small version of that business. And what did it take? And when I went and ran a bigger version, a scaled version, I knew what the business model was. And the business model we're witnessing today of these streamers is cockamamie. Let me just tell you all what is a model that works, because it works in the food business, it works in TV. All businesses are very similar. It works in real estate, it works. You cannot make hundreds of thousands of TV shows that are very expensive and charge people $10 a month or $20 or $30 and make the money back. It's a disaster ready to fall, a house of cards ready to fall. Bob Iger said it this week. He said, we've all spent way too much money and now we're all in deep trouble. And all the stock of all these companies are going under. So that everybody understands, the model used to be that you'd make 2 or 3 shows. Those shows had to be premium, fabulous, whatever. And they had to be branded in a specific space. And the rest of the stuff you watched was filler, old shows that we would repurpose. And you would air them in a way that you would create, well, in today's world, an algorithm does that for you. But back then we had a geeky person that would literally go, if we put this show that's old in this time slot, we'll get this number. And you'd add up the numbers and you'd come up with a number that would make you money from advertisers. All of this has gone out the window. Now we're all paying a premium for a bunch of shows we don't have time to watch. And we're watching commercials now too. I mean, this is crazy making, and it's insanity, and it's going to implode. I promise all of you. I've been saying it for a few years, and now all my friends are like, wow, this is all crazy. And now on top of that, you buy a channel, like let's say you buy Paramount to watch the Kevin Costner show, And then you realize you don't have time to watch every season. And by the time you get ready to watch that season, they've sold the window of watching that season to Peacock.
Yep.
It's insanity. The
Yep.
whole thing is crazy making. So we see, everybody that's an actor or a writer or all this, everybody goes, oh my God, there's so many jobs for actors and writers. And yeah, there's a lot of jobs for a lot less money, let me just say.
Yeah.
And people that are actors or writers or does not have to do 3 other side hustles to make a living.
So then you fundamentally see it as they're missing, because the business model's wrong, right? Like if you look at print media, if you look at television, there was this opportunity to move to streaming. It was missed by some of the larger players. And so now the game has been, instead of making 2 or 3 really premium, fabulous things, everyone's trying to make, thousands upon thousands of mediocre things. And there's an overwhelmed effect on the consumer. Is that kind of what you're getting at? And like, they
Yeah,
just don't.
and I think that there's no way to watch it all. And
Yeah.
I think people are dropping a lot of their streamer subscriptions because they realize I don't even have time to watch this.
So
And,
from a
and there's
content
now
creator,
such a glut of content that
Yeah.
there will be content for many, many, many years to come for local TV stations to just repurpose other Netflix or other people's programming that no one's watched.
right. I mean, it's going to be.
I mean, put it this way: this is not the emerging business of the moment. Like, I'm not going to tell all young people go run and go into entertainment. It's not the business that's going to make you a millionaire right now. If it was, I would still be in it. I am now selling old IP that I own to these people because I can, but I'm not going to start doing new shows for what? I'm not going to make any money at it. I'd only do it if it was like, at this point, because I have money. If I was going to make a show because I feel like it, because it's my creative, whatever.
It speaks to you. It's part of your mission, right?
Yeah, it's something I want to do because I want to do it, but not because it's going to make money.
Yeah, money before mission.
This is not the moment to go into this field. It isn't.
So then what are the industries, especially right now? Real estate's falling apart.
Yeah.
And it's a hot mess in commercial.
Yeah.
Residential's okay in some markets, but it's struggling. What are the spaces that you, as a woman you've rode the wave not only of economic booms and busts, but you've also personally rode the wave of going through a family establishing itself in the nation. You now have a family of your own son. And now, someday, let's be honest, like you'll be raising grandbabies, hopefully someday when you're, a leading figure of that next gen. So what do you see as the opportunity now? Let's pretend you had a son who's stepping into the business world.
No, I do. And
exactly. What advice would you give him of like, where's the money? Where's the honeypot?
Let me tell you, first of all, how to figure this out yourselves. And then I'll tell you what I'm focused on. I think that it's very simple. Go to ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, what are the emerging businesses of the next 10 years? What are the emerging cities to live on that I could become rich in 10 years? The word is emerging, okay? And I think that you're going to find out that the number one business for the next 10 years will be AI. And what I mean by that is not just AI itself, but the teaching of prompting to different industries. All the things that AI will kill a lot of jobs and it will create a lot of jobs, right? So ask ChatGPT, because I have done it. And I'm going to tell you that of all the businesses that are coming up, the number one thing that we should all be looking at, I think, is biotech besides AI.
Yeah.
Let's just use common sense. What are we listening to on TV? Oprah is taking the drugs that are now available to lose weight. We have had, because of the pandemic, we have had a quantum leap in different medicines and different, from vaccines to all kinds of different meds that have been created, right? We are going to see a world now where obesity was the biggest problem in the United States. It's going to be gone. Okay. These drugs will eventually, you'll be able to get them for $12 a month. And which means that the next big thing happening in the world is longevity. There are drugs coming down the pike. There are supplements coming down the pike that will make you live 20 years longer. I don't think people focused on CRISPR. CRISPR was something invented by two women that won the Nobel Prize, which allowed people to change people's DNA. Mm-hmm. Now we can actually go in, injections go in and actually tell your DNA to resolve that problem in your body.
Yeah.
So the work of David Sinclair, the work of Diamandis, the work of a lot of people in biotech, and many, many, many more, that is another world that is going to quantum leap. So healthcare as we know it is going to change. Longevity, aging is going to change. I mean, I myself am taking my old brand, Nick, we haven't had time to talk, the Swan, and I'm going to reinvent it as an anti-aging brand.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm going to do content for that brand.
Fascinating.
I think people should be thinking about content creation as content creation to sell a brand versus just make TV shows. There's so many TV shows and so many movies. That's not the hot business right now.
No, it's what's the business model that it's free advertising around, right? The content.
Correct.
And to that point, so on the longevity piece, and then I'll open up for a couple questions if there are any. And if you do have a question, feel free to maybe raise the digital hand, and then I'll open it up. One of the things I found interesting on longevity. So yes, it's biotech, yes, it's health, but let's extrapolate out what it's like to live to 100 and let's say 60, just for fun.
Yeah.
Because I think that's very real for my sons. They're 11 and 13 right now. I think it's going to be possible for them to live to 160. That's a no-brainer. Which sounds crazy to say out loud.
Because you know what? Right before I came on this podcast, I spent 3 hours with my financial planner.
Here we go.
Remodeling my financial plan to last to 120.
Here we go. So you know what's funny? Nelly, I'll tell you about this. There's a friend of mine specifically tackling this space. He works for a big financial house. And he's been looking at a way to get ahead of the underwriters and sell certain policy packages to people who believe they're going to live to 150. Yep. And then because the underwriters will still sell them for super cheap because the likelihood, quote unquote, right now of the modeling still has no one living to 150. So paying for that, there's going to be a window where someone tackles it and sells these annuities that you can buy. And then it's going to quite literally bankrupt some of these firms if they're not paying attention. Yeah. And it's a little window. It's a tiny window, but it's an opportunity that's being created by longevity that no one was paying attention to.
That's right.
And so it's not just that, it's housing, it's so many other things. I love that you pointed that out as a major boom that's happening and will continue to happen.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? Kind of, I don't see any hands up, and I have more to run with. But if anybody has a question, feel free to pop their digital hand up. I'll give it a second. Okay. I do have one that was submitted, and I wanted to throw it out to you because you are a best-selling author. This was submitted earlier, and that came up, and the question was, is writing a book hard? Because I think everyone at some point thinks about I want to write a book. But What is your perspective on writing a book? Was it enjoyable? Was it worth it? You talked about finding your voice. So tell me your thoughts on that.
I mean, yes, I thought it was very hard the first time I did it. Now I think I've mastered it. I'm in the middle of a second book, Nick. I don't know if I've told you this, but my book is coming out in October, and I'm co-writing it with a guy who is the tax engineer for every billionaire in America. And it's going to be about taxes as the final hurrah to wealth building, understanding the tax code to become wealthy, to understand how to live like billionaires who don't pay tax because they know how to use the tax code. And I'm sort of taking that and unpacking that for small business owners. Because I think it's really the final thing that I had to learn for myself. And so I want to share it with other people. I think writing a book is important because I think it is it kind of like declares your brand and your expertise. But what what I think I would never do again is publish a book through a publisher. I think that's another industry that didn't see what was coming, and they've blown it. They bring nothing to the picture, and you can do this all yourself 100 times better and actually make money on your book.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. I was just listening to an interview with a gentleman who he likes to look for industries where there's not a lot of transparency in the supply chain, and then he tries to understand why. And one of them he brought up was the publishing industry and what's the actual cost to produce a book.
Mm-hmm.
And because you get these advances, but they don't really tell you what the real costs are and how many books actually sell. They like to keep that close to themselves. And the other one was the truffle market. He likes these weird spaces that there's not a lot of transparency on the costs and supply chain and how to go disrupt them. But the data behind books, oh my gosh, like the amount of money that's actually made on a good book, it's pretty staggering when they pick one that actually is a winner. And this guy's point was, if you know your book's going to be a winner, do it all on your own and go direct. But I think it comes down to, do you have that voice as well, right? Like, have you established your voice? Have you practiced your voice? Are you leading with your voice? Do you have any, Nely?
Oh, can I just say one more thing about the books?
Please,
I think that
please.
the book industry is based on this false notion that you have to hit the New York Times bestseller or some bestseller. That means you have to sell a lot of books, when in fact, there are books that people write about, especially in the business area, where there may be a business, like, it's like you need a smaller audience. Like, there might be X amount of people that need an expertise that you have that's not huge to sell a New York Times bestseller. But then you're like the classic book in that space. And it's just like everything. Like, we used to think you have to make TV shows for millions of people, when in fact, maybe 30,000 people is enough to make a show work, right? In a specific space. And when you publish yourself and you do it yourself, and you might have already a connection to that audience, you actually become the leader in that space. And no publisher will take you. And then you think, oh, my book isn't viable. Yes, it is viable. So declare yourself and go after that audience and do it yourself for them.
I love it. I love it. It's great advice. And if people want to follow you, Nely, where's the best place for them to follow you? I know you've got an email list, right? Your website is nelygalan.com.
I think the
but how
best
about
way
on
to
social?
find me today, I mean, I have Instagram at Nely Galan. I think LinkedIn is how people find me the easiest, because it's kind of open and you can write to me. But also, I just want to share, Nick, that I have a podcast that I'm now on hiatus because I did 130 of them. I really tried to do kind of like what I know about business in 130 podcasts. And I'm very proud because I did it in English and Spanish, because I really wanted to onboard Latino immigrants. And so in English, it's called Money Maker, one word, Money Maker, with Nely Galan. And I called it that because I became the money maker of my family as an immigrant. And I want to talk about what it is to be the money maker in your family. And in Spanish, it's called Mi Mundo Rico. And it's on every podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, whatever. And I think I really break down in a very intimate way how I got to where I am. And I interview kind of all of my mentors.
I love it. That's incredible. Thank you so much for that too. And make sure everyone goes and subscribes and likes that. And I can just tell you already, I've listened to those, and it's worth giving her also 5 stars. Nely does a good job. And back to kind of the original moment, you don't stop. You keep going, and you keep serving, and you keep showing up for your community. And a good example of it is the fact that this podcast is in English and in Spanish, because you are showing up for people you love, you care about. Your new book is about unlocking secrets that so many people feel are way past them. I mean, taxes are one of the scariest things for people coming on board. It's a joke that people make about death and taxes. And you're, again, shining a light on something that's scary for people. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for your friendship, your leadership, your pioneering. as another co-traveler.
No, Nick,
on
you're
this
a
earth.
phenomenal leader and you're a dear friend, and we've connected so clear. I mean, you have given me so many ahas, as you know. And I'm just so glad you've created this beautiful community, because we all really do need each other. And I just want to say, as someone older and wiser probably than most of you, because I am older, it does get easier and better. So hang in there, because a lot of these thoughts of like, what am I supposed to do with my life and where do I fit in and all of this stuff, and is it going to work out? I promise you it does work out. And you do get to a place. Look, life is constant. I mean, I'm constantly learning and growing, and I still go to therapy and all these things, but it does get easier because you finally feel comfortable in your skin. And I just want you all to know that going through all of these thoughts, and the fact that you guys are, introspective, and that you're even listening to podcasts, and that you're even trying to learn. A lot of people just go through life numb and not really looking inward at all. And the process of doing this does really, it adds up. And you do get to the place where you're really comfortable and happy with yourself. And that's the greatest gift of all.
Such a great way to end. Nely, thank you so much. I really appreciate you.